YouTube channel. And today we are joined by Darlene Lancer, who's a licensed marriage and family therapist. Thank you so much for joining us today, Darlene.
Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. I know there's a massive time difference between us, so I'm glad we've managed to arrange this, and I do appreciate your time. For people who don't know who you are, Darlene, could you just give us like a brief synopsis of your background and your history and what led you to doing what you're doing now?
Yeah, I was a lawyer for many years, but I was never happy doing that. And then midlife, I changed careers to do what I always wanted to do as a child, and that was become a therapist and eventually an author. So I wrote Codependency for Dummies 2011. It was published in 2012. And then a few years later, Hazelton asked me to write Conquering Shame and Codependency. My books are either side of my head. And then recently I wrote Dating, Loving, and Leaving a Narcissist over here on my lower right over here. Because it turns out a lot of codependents are in relationships with narcissists. So, but all along I've been having for over 30 years a psychotherapy practice, and I coach people internationally. So I enjoy that.
That's awesome, Darlene. Thank you for that. Yeah, and just touching on, I just mentioned it just before we start the interview, Darlene. I've actually read Darlene's Codependency for Book for Dummies about 3 or 4 times, and I'm actually dyslexic and I struggle reading. So that was a book I found quite easy to read, and internalize it to memory. And I usually struggle with my memory too. So Darlene did actually say it's available on audio now as well. So there you go, another side benefit. So kind of touching on what you had mentioned then, Darlene, about narcissism. I know your work on this is quite prolific. Even your website, you go into great detail about codependency and narcissism and self-esteem and tying it all together. I know the term narcissist gets thrown around quite a lot as a kind of famous buzzword now. People just throw it out kind of whimsically over everything these days. Is there a proper clinical definition of this, of someone with actual narcissistic personality disorder rather than just a narcissistic tendency?
Right. It's called NPD. And they require like 5 traits. 3 are essential, which would be lack of empathy, and then an unrealistic need and expectation of admiration. And the 3rd would be grandiosity. And it could be not just how successful they are, but it could be, I should be successful, like in their imagination. And then there's 9 traits altogether, but they only need like 2 more, those 3 and 2 more to qualify. So of the 9, there's several that start with E to help you remember, a sense of entitlement, that they are above the law, above the rules, they're special, they deserve special treatment, they shouldn't have to wait in line, buy a ticket, pay their bills, or whatever. They're entitled because they're so special and great. Exploitation. They often exploit other people. Envy. They can be very envious of other people because they want to be number one. They don't want anyone to be better than them. And with some narcissists, they will retaliate and try to undermine someone who they think is better than them or achieve something that they think only they should achieve. So that kind of vindictiveness and retaliation, the more malignant, there's a type of narcissist they call malignant. It's more severe and more cruel, more sociopathic. They might go after someone who they envy. So those are 3 more. And then arrogance. They think they're better than everyone else. And it kind of goes along with feeling better than and special. They like to associate with high status people, high status in institutions. They want to wear only designer labels and drive the best car, brag about the best school they went to, get the best table at the best restaurant. You kind of get the picture. So those are some of the other traits that, and entitlement, by the way, is one that's considered the most obnoxious and hard to live with. And clients are telling me, I did so much, I sacrificed for my husband or my wife, and I asked like one favor and they couldn't be bothered. or I would never do that to them. I would never hurt them this way or that. So they don't understand. A narcissist thinks they're special, and people complain that they're hypocritical. Well, that's part of the diagnosis. The rules for other people don't apply to them. So
that's a great answer. Yeah, that
yeah.
is one of the things, isn't it? They are like pathological hypocrites. That they say do and do like two different things. It's interesting with I know you mentioned then about entitlement and arrogance. I know you mentioned on a lot of your videos you mentioned about aggression as well, and how this ties in with narcissism. Is that an actual core characteristic of narcissism, or is that just something that could potentially exacerbate? No.
No,
Okay.
they're narcissists that are not aggressive. Just because they may be critical, or think they're better, that's not necessarily considered aggression. So on the other hand, it's not one of the traits in the diagnostic manual. However, the more aggressive a narcissist is, the more severe their narcissism. So I haven't said it directly, but imply that it exists on a continuum. So some people might just have the minimum 5 traits, and some people have all 9 and they're all severe. So they can have 5 and they're mild. So it's on a continuum, and the more severe, the more lying they do, the more they break the law, immoral, the more cruel they are, then it's considered malignant narcissism, and borderlines on like there's sociopathic narcissists. They qualify for sociopathy and narcissism, where sometimes they have a conduct disorder in childhood, and then there's more illegal, immoral behavior, more cruelty, more lying, vindictiveness, and that sort of thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great answer.
Oh,
yeah.
I know what I was going to say. Yeah. One of the traits of narcissists is that they are, this is hereditary, by the way. It's 50% hereditary narcissism.
Wow, I never knew that.
Also environmental. Yeah. So the research on twins. So they have a personality trait that's antagonistic. So they may be very disruptive and constantly want to argue or disagree. They're disagreeable. So a trait that people inherit could be agreeableness, conscientiousness, extroversion, introversion. Those are inherited traits. So they score very low on agreeableness. So they generally are, that's one of the common traits that ties them all together, very disagreeable, not necessarily aggressive, but many are aggressive. Some could be violent, although it's not necessarily true that, that they're violent.
Yeah. No, yeah, I love that. That's so interesting. I've never heard that statistic before. Yeah. And in terms of that, there was another video I'd seen a while back, and you were referring to rage from the narcissist. And I think if I remember rightly, is it some form of like attack on? They view it as like an attack on the self. It's a very, very deep and very primal wound. Could you just talk about that a little bit and how that
Sure.
happens?
It's called narcissistic rage, and it's when they feel humiliated. So one of the things that explains their whole personality and all these traits is shame. So they think they're better than, because like a bully inside, they're afraid they're less than. So it's their whole personality is a mask for their insecurity. So they're very thin-skinned. So people say they can dish, but they can't take it. So they're very sensitive to criticism. And by the way, introverted narcissists are the most sensitive of all. And I can go into the different types if you'd like me to.
Yeah, that's a good.
Yeah, they're considered like the covert narcissists. So they're very sensitive to criticism, and when they feel that they're attacked, and you may not have attacked them or said anything derogatory, but in their mind they feel criticized, and they can go into a rage. So just to inform people, anger is different than rage. Anger is like when you don't get your needs met, you're frustrated, can't get what you want. So rage is usually goes back to your childhood. It's touching some wound where it's an existential threat. It's like your identity is under attack. So going back to their childhood or their view of themselves, that they're so great. So if there's any chink in their armor, it's like a mortal wound to them because they have to keep up this facade. So the rage is to push you away. It's a way to keep them safe. Their anger and their aggression is to keep them safe. That's the motive for to push you away, even though it ruins relationships.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. It is that. Is it essentially because when you do push that button, and it's interesting because it could be something so like infinitesimal, like so small to the average person, but to them it's this humongous thing, and it's like you push them ever so slightly, and all of a sudden they just fall apart. Is it that because when they are exposed, it is actually exposing that facade that you're kind of alluding to there, that they are so angry that they have to, like you're saying then, like it's not like a transient feeling of anger where you didn't really get your needs met, so you're frustrated, but because they're exposed, is like, you're seeing me now for who I actually am. I'm going to actually hurt you back as, like just as much, or something to that effect.
Well, they think they're exposed, or to themselves. Like if you disagree or prove them wrong about something, you never should argue with a narcissist. It's a losing battle because, first of all, you give them an opportunity to be one up on you, because that's what their whole thing is. Like they want to win. Their partners want to go along to get along. Narcissists want to be on top. They want to get ahead. They don't care about getting along. So they'll provoke arguments just to show you you're wrong and they're right. They just want to one up you. So when you argue with them, in a sense, you're saying, do you approve of me? Do you validate me? If you just say, well, we disagree, and walk away, then they're left with their own like insecurity and upset. So when you disagree, then in their mind, maybe their correctness or their authority or whatever is being challenged. Who they're immaculate, they're perfectionism. A lot of them are perfectionists. It's been called, sometimes narcissism is called the pursuit of perfection, because they have to, they have perfect health. They wrote the perfect letter. They have to be perfect in the best, in number one in everything. So anything that dispels that illusion, they can't tolerate. So they'll go into a rage to kind of like push that away and to defend themselves.
Wow, that's incredible, and I've definitely seen that actually happen many, many times with a lot of people. I know you kind of were touching on it then, Darlene, where you mentioned about that it is kind of a losing battle with narcissism, that they almost love the bringing you into their world and fighting back. Yeah. Is there a way to not necessarily fight with them, but is there a way that you can assert your needs in a way that you might get them from a narcissist if someone has like maybe some of the tendencies or something like that?
Yeah, that's what my book is all about. It's like, how to improve or leave narcissistic and abusive relationships. And a narcissist is very insecure underneath. So a lot of the things people do naturally gives them more power. And the book is about how to take back your power and how to try to get your needs met. And you can make substantial changes. You might not get them to be very empathetic and nurturing to you. That's probably not going to happen. But you can get them to stop their abusive behavior by basically it's operant conditioning, reward and punishment. You don't reward the bad behavior. You reward the good behavior, and you don't engage in their illusions, and they'll draw you into their reality, and you get really confused. So you don't do that. You don't defend yourself. There's an acronym called JADE, Jade. So you don't justify, you don't argue, you don't defend, you don't explain. You don't have to justify your position to them. They're never going to agree with you. They always think they're right. So you have to detach from that. That's difficult because, when I talk to clients, they really want to be understood by the narcissist. They don't realize the narcissist sees them as a two-dimensional cutout, like an extension of themselves. That has to do with their, early development. I go into a lot in the book. So they don't have object constancy. They don't see you as separate from themselves. So they don't even realize or think about that you have separate needs, that you have separate feelings, that you have separate value other than what they need you for. So to try to be understood by them, in most cases, is a losing proposition. Now, some narcissists are more capable of that than others. They're more introspective. Some will even apologize. So again, it exists on a continuum. So you have to find out, and my book has a lot of scripts and checklists and things like that. You have to find out where your leverage is. So for instance, if you're training a dog, is he going to want reward with food or treats, or is he going to want hugs and be petted? Or you have to find out what this narcissist really wants from you. Maybe it's sex, maybe it's companionship, maybe it's just attention, wants to be listened to, maybe it's praise, maybe with a woman narcissist, she wants to know how beautiful she is. So, and then you let them know that when they do their bad behavior, and you say it in not in a judgmental way that's going to start an argument, and you make I statements, you have to be assertive about it, not blaming, not judging, but just very matter of fact, when you don't help with the children, or don't, you leave your mess around or something, my loving feelings go away. I don't really feel like, attending your business meeting with you, your partner's meeting or whatever it is, because, and you keep emphasizing, this is a two-way street. I don't feel like when you don't help me, I don't feel like we're partners. Or I start to lose hope about the relationship, how this can last. Because, it's a two-way street. Relationships, everything is transactional for them. They want to get what they want at the lowest price. It's like they're always negotiating. How can I get what I want with the lowest investment? So I had a client who complained her narcissist never took responsibility for everything. Well, because she took responsibility. She was always helping him in every way. And then he got, off scot-free, was never had to take responsibility. And that's the way he was raised, probably. So people complain, oh, my partner is so entitled. Well, they are probably feeling unentitled. They sacrifice, they say he's so selfish. Well, they're too selfless. So I tell people, codependents, they have to be a little more narcissistic. It's not, you could have healthy narcissism too. I have a blog I have over 200 blogs on my website. You mentioned that, and I went on like healthy narcissism.
That's awesome. Just to add to that as well, I read some of Darlene's blogs just before, like preparing for this interview, and they're really well written. Honestly, Darlene, you're an amazing writer. You have this ability to really bring a lot of like nuanced concepts which make a lot of sense to me and put them in a very clear way, and also make it very creative when you write, which keeps me interested. It isn't just like this bland, like psychobabble. It's like, oh God, this is just like, it keeps me engaged. And then when I see it in real time, I'm like, right, yeah, I get it now. And just touching on what you said about assertiveness skills as well, Darlene. I know you mentioned an I statement. I did actually notice when I was speaking to you, I can tell that you have like really, really worked on yourself as well. I can tell that you've done a lot of work with your own recovery and boundaries, and I get that sense from you.
But it's interesting what you said. One of my first books, I think maybe even before I wrote the Dummies book, I can't quite remember, but around the same time, was 10 Steps to Self-Esteem, the ultimate guide to stop self-criticism. So all aside from the 3 paperbacks, I wrote 8 ebooks. They're all self-help books with exercises. So one of the main things that people have to do is work with their inner critic, because people are shaming themselves all the time and they may not know it. And it could cause depression and paralysis and low self-esteem. So that book is a 10 simple exercises, sequential, to start to befriend your inner critic. And then the next one I wrote in answer to your question was how to speak your mind, become assertive, and set limits. And that's an ongoing process. I've worked on it, and it takes years to change it, especially in situations where you're emotionally charged. Like if you're in an argument, you feel threatened, you're hurt or angry, naturally you want to say you this or you that. So you have to make it a habit to start saying, take responsibility for yourself and say, I'm feeling this or I'm feeling that, because otherwise the other person leaves the conversation because now they're on the defensive. And nobody makes you feel a certain way. Maybe you're feeling that way because it's a trigger from your childhood or something. And then I turn both of those books into webinars on my website. So, yeah. So and what I was going to say is that I point this out in my ebooks. The way you speak and your boundaries, your ability to be assertive conveys your self-esteem.
Wow.
And when you build your assertiveness skills, you incidentally build, or at the same time, build your self-esteem. And the more you build your self-esteem, the more assertive you become. So it's a synergistic process. And those are two learning skills. Those are just things that are learned that weren't learned in your childhood because of shame growing up and dysfunctional communication. Most codependents come from families that one or both parents were passive or aggressive, and they didn't learn assertiveness, and they didn't, their feelings and needs, their voice, opinion wasn't respected. So they have to feel that what they have to say and their needs and wants and feelings have value. So that's part of your self-esteem and recovery. But those are things you can learn. It's certainly not hopeless.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that you mentioned that it operates like in parallel with your self-esteem, and then that feeds into the next. And yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, for example, if you go on a job interview and they ask a question and you don't give a direct answer, you start beating around the bush. Not only are you annoying the interviewer, it's showing insecurity and low self-esteem. Because self-esteem, you could admit, no, that's not one of my strengths, or I don't know, or let me think about it. Or, you could be direct and honest about it.
Love that. Yeah. So it sounds like making the I statements, being more direct, it all feeds into it. And like you said, then it's like a learnable skill. So even if you might not have it right now, you can definitely use it as practice.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember what psychotherapist said, but they were saying that boundaries are almost like a spiritual practice, like having to assert yourself and feeding it into your self-esteem. And it's like this day in, day out thing. Amazing writer. Definitely noticed, because I've actually started working with a coach myself, and it's been like, whoa, a massive difference. I was so stubborn. I actually had one for my weight training recently, and then I've just got one for healing and for codependency and self-esteem, all the stuff that you write about, and what a massive difference it is. Having someone there, and it really broadened my perspective. So everything you've said on this interview, Darlene, I definitely really relate to. I know we're kind of pressed for time, Darlene, but is there anything in terms, say if someone is listening to this and they're hearing all these concepts of self-esteem and possibly narcissism, codependency, shame, is there anything you would recommend doing people do to get started with their own healing, and improving their relationships, improving their self-esteem?
Well, I would start, one of the first exercise in 10 steps to self-esteem is to write down in your negative self-talk. Most people are not conscious of how much they shit on themselves. Oh, your shoulds, that's judgment. So write it down every day and get it out on paper so you can see it. You might not like what you see, but you can't change what's unconscious. Even when they tell people who want to quit smoking, they say, don't try to stop, just count how many cigarettes you have. Just become more aware. And that creates a shift in itself. So that's number one. And then a lot of codependents can't identify their feelings or their needs. So start asking yourself, what am I feeling? Write about it. Journaling is very powerful. In the Dummies book, I have a list of about 200 feelings. See if you can, and you may not be able to figure it out right away, but be patient. Sometimes feelings are a mixture. Like I think guilt combines fear and anger. It's anger at yourself or fear. So try to figure out what you're feeling. And then if you're feeling in a bad way, ask yourself, what do I need? And sit with it until you can figure out what you need. And then go ahead and meet your needs, because good parenting is mirroring. So I see that you're sad. And then the parent gives help. Let me give you a hug. Let me reassure you. So a parent needs to mirror and empathize and give help. So those are things most codependents didn't have, healthy parenting. You have to learn to do for yourself. And then you can set boundaries. If you don't, then you could be more assertive and set boundaries. You have to know what you feel, what you want, what you need, and give it value. So it's not because I say it in my book or I say it, you have to feel that you deserve it. You don't want to be treated that way, or you expect a certain reciprocity or to be treated a certain way.
Yeah, love that. Love that. Yeah, I definitely remember certain phrases from your book. It's really weird. There's certain books that I have, like, typically with my dyslexia, I read a line and then completely forget the line and then have to go back. One of the ones that I've always remembered, and I read this book, I think it must have been, it might have been the second to last year in my unit. It might have been 2016. I want to say possibly. But I remember you said that your impact dwindles with words. And you were saying how that if you when you're relating to self-assertiveness, that if you just drag it out and make it not particularly very concise and make it like this waffly speech when you're trying to assert your boundaries, that the impact can dwindle. Would you agree with that as well, Darlene? You're saying about keeping it like concise, short, to the point, say how you feel.
I have a blog on assertiveness. I go into it in depth in my book and webinar, the keys to assertiveness. And one of them is, directness, conciseness, courtesy, cognizance, taking responsibility for what you're saying. Listening is very important. It's not just thinking about what you're going to say, but listening to the other person. If you want them to hear you, you have to listen to them too.
Thank you so much for your time, Darlene. I could literally listen to you all day speak. Honestly, you're a really insightful person, and thank you so much for your time. If people are interested in working with you and they've listened to this stuff, I know for a lot of people, like when they hear this stuff, because it is quite to the core of our personalities and who we are as people. If they've taken to this message, is there the best way to get in contact with you? Or if they want to work with you, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
Well, my website, you can look for my name, darlenelancer.com. And I have a website, whatiscodependency.com. And in the menu is the services page. So you can go there and find out more about how to work with me. If you're outside of California, I do coaching internationally. And you can sign up to my website, get my blogs. You can listen to my podcasts on my media page and webinars. And I have a YouTube channel. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. So every day I post different things and different articles. I also write for Medium. So if you just put my name in Google, you'll find me.
Awesome, yeah. Honestly, it's amazing, Darlene. You seem to do so much, considering like you cover so many grounds in your work. I definitely recommend people get Darlene's book, Codependency of Dummies, if that is touch you on the interview. So I'm going to wrap it up there, Darlene. Hope to speak to you soon, Darlene. Okay.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.